Hey, you feel that? You are now tuned into You Feel That with Bryce the Third. Yo, and welcome to You Feel That with Bryce the Third, the show where we aim to turn your I can'ts into I got this by providing you with tools to help empower you emotionally and mentally, no matter what field you're in. Too long didn't read version. Emotional wellness for the rest of us. And I, of course, am your host, Bryce the Third, popping on real quick to give you here for a good time, not a long time episode. Yesterday was the Happy New Hill event, and we did our first recording of You Feel That live, and it was phenomenal, and I can't wait to share that episode with you all, and I can't wait to pop up in your city or in your area with You Feel That and do a live podcast recording. It was a phenomenal experience to have the people in front of us and have a guest on in front of people and kind of have that steer the conversation that we had. And I had my guy Tori Gray on, and it was just a beautiful event. It was a beautiful night, and I can't wait to share it with you all. Tonight, I wanted to talk with you real quick about how important it is to not allow. So, here on You Feel That, we're big on emotions. And there's this element of emotional intelligence that allows for us to put our emotions in their place, to not be dominated by our emotions. And I know, it's been big for me to come and empower you all. And a big part of being empowered is to have direction in what it is that we're creating, and to have autonomy and to have say in what it is that we are creating. And sometimes our emotions can get in the way of what it is that we're looking to create. And what I mean by this is I don't feel like getting up out of bed in the morning. Like, I really am not a morning person. But what I've learned is that even though I don't feel like it, doing it anyway allows me to be who it is that I've intended to be. I have intentions that I've set aside that, okay, these things are important. It's important for me to be productive. It's important for me to be organized and orderly. It's important for me to be a creative, a well-respected creator. And so these things that I've come to discover that are important to me, like, they require certain type of actions. They require for me to show up in life in certain capacities. And sometimes my emotions go contradictory to what it is that I've intended to do. And that's perfectly fine. That's exactly what an emotion will do. It'll show up, and when it shows up in those moments, we honor them, we observe them, we allow them to come and go, and then we do the shit anyway. So, like, I don't want to get up in the morning. I don't feel like it, but if I find process that allows me to get up and do it anyway, like, I apply that versus like, oh, well, I have to honor how I feel, and my emotions tell me that I shouldn't get up today, because if I don't get up today, then the things that I've intended to do will not happen. So learning to do it anyway, I think, is very important. There was a question that was asked when we were doing the live recording of the podcast where the person had asked, how can I be, what advice do you have for a creative who is fearful and anxious about what it is that they're creating and producing? And it was this thing that I had discovered recently just in my own personal experience that I was journaling, and there's a lot of things that I'm putting myself on the forefront of, the face of, and I was wondering, like, why is there's these things that pop up in my life, like I'll be late places, or just these little self-sabotaging things that I've done. And like, looking at it, I looked at it and I realized, like, oh, I'm afraid. Like, I'm afraid to lead. Like, in my investigation and sitting in meditation and in journaling, and like I discovered, like, oh, I'm afraid to lead. And then hidden inside of that, I found that, oh, it's okay to be afraid and lead at the same time. Like, those things aren't mutually exclusive. I can be tired and wake up at the same time. I can hate working out and go and do it at the same time. I can not feel like being social, but knowing that one of the things that I intend is to create and cultivate new connections, then figuring out how to be social, or putting myself in maybe situations that don't necessarily agree with the inside of me telling me, like, oh no, run. My hairs are standing up at the edge of my skin because I'm in these social situations, but this is what I want. Like, I want to be social. Like, I want to be around people. I want to have connections. So sometimes we have to learn to listen to our emotions and honor our emotions and do what it is that we've set out to do anyway. And that's okay. And I think this speaks to the process of learning ourselves, of having this conversation with ourselves that allows for us to discover more and more of who it is that we are. And that's the whole point of this show. That's the whole point of any guest that I will get on the show, because I want to get their perspective on how they're showing up for themselves in their own lives. And I've shared tools with you all of how it is that I show up in my life. And the beautiful thing about life is how I show up in my life in this season may not be how I show up in my life in the next season, because as seasons change, so do I. So do I. Seeing myself and having a conversation with myself is not like this thing that we do one time. It's this thing that's a continuous process. And for us to show up for our process and our practices to continue to allow for the changes to take place. And sometimes we have to be the catalyst to those changes. So if we're realizing like, oh, I'm not a morning person, haven't been a morning person, and first of all, like I don't like claiming something that is undesirable to me. So me saying I'm not a morning person when I would like to be up, like that's kind of like casting a spell upon me and continuously forcing me into the mode of a person who is not a morning person. So I previously have not been a morning person, but you never know what tomorrow holds. And I may wake up and I may hate to wake up in the morning, but I can get up tired and get up anyway. I can be afraid to lead and put myself in positions to be a leader anyway. I can have anxiety around how my creation will be received and still create and put it out anyway. And the beautiful thing about that is like energy is big, man. Like when we get into energy, when we become a part of the energy and begin to contribute to these buckets of our intention with our actions, what ends up happening is we get the feedback, we get the lessons that allow for us to discover things in ourselves that may be required to maintain, gain, cultivate the things that we've intended. How do I say that simpler? Our life requires for us to show up for ourselves. And sometimes how we show up for ourselves may be in opposition to how it is that we feel like showing up. Like I don't fucking feel like it. And that's okay. Sometimes you got to practice the opposite. Sometimes you got to show up and do what it is that you know that the person that you want to be would do versus what it is that you feel like doing. And that's okay. You know, I'm big on honoring our emotions, but honoring our emotions doesn't mean being a slave to them. And we can be empowered and we can tackle whatever it is that we want to tackle. We have the power to be able to do so. And I'm going to continue to show up to this space to put ideas, concepts, tools on the floor that help you to be empowered to do those things for yourself. And with that, head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave me a rating and review. It'll be wonderful if you could leave a paragraph or so to let people know how much you've enjoyed this show. I know when I go to podcasts and I look at the star rating, I'll look and see who all is a raving fan. If I see so many raving fans under there, I'm going to start listening to that podcast. Head to the YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube. My book, The Handbook, a pocket guide for designing your desired reality and being a good human while you're at it, is out now. And I will put the link in the show notes of this podcast. Share this podcast with 5 people who you know maybe could benefit from learning that we don't have to be a slave to our emotions. Follow me on social media at Bryce the Third, at You Feel That Podcast. I'm super excited about the upcoming weeks. We got some prolific guests coming on to the pod, and I can't wait for you to hear how their minds and their spirits work. Till then, be intentional, love on each other, have compassion for your process, and I'll see you next time on You Feel That with Bryce the Third.